This is Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast where we bring Jesus into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I'm Jason Romano. My email address is jason@sportspectrum.com. Jason@sportspectrum.com. You can email me directly. Any questions you might have, any thoughts on today's guest, Darren Woodson, or anything you want to add to today's show, you can reach me directly, jason@sportspectrum.com. We are presented today by IJM, the International Justice Mission. You can become a freedom partner and join the fight to end slavery in our lifetime. Yes, it still exists today. You can check out the website, ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF, and become a freedom partner today. Very excited to welcome Darren Woodson to Sports Spectrum today. Darren's one of the great guys you'll ever meet. Longtime Dallas Cowboy. Played with the Cowboys from 1992 to 2004. Retired after that 2004 season. Originally selected in the second round of the 1992 NFL Draft. 37th overall out of Arizona State. He was a linebacker in college. He came to the Cowboys. They converted him to safety, and he was a pretty darn good one. He won 3 Super Bowls, a 5-time Pro Bowler, a 4-time first-team All-Pro, and then in 2015, he was named to the Dallas Cowboys Ring of Honor. After retirement, he went on to have a long NFL broadcasting career at ESPN from 2005 to 2019, and now today, he is the host of his own podcast, The Darren Woodson Show, available everywhere podcasts are found. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I grew up as a Cowboys fan. I'm still a Cowboys fan. So anytime I talk to someone like Darren Woodson, and Darren and I know each other for our time at ESPN, but it's a treat for me. I go into that fan mode that I go into sometimes thinking about my years rooting for the Cowboys. So this is a lot of fun. But Darren's got a really powerful story of faith that, honestly, I didn't know either. So I'm really excited for you to hear about Darren's faith journey. We talk some football as well. He shares some powerful stories, some amazingly funny stories, and it's a great conversation with Darren Woodson, the 3-time Super Bowl champion, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Darren Woodson, he is a 3-time Super Bowl champion with the Dallas Cowboys. Darren, what's up, brother? Welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Man, life is good, man. A little different. With COVID, I'm not at the office. I got, own a couple of companies and can't go to the office, but I'm at home enjoying it with the family for the most part. I don't know if the family's enjoying it with me, but I'm enjoying it with the family.
As we all are in kind of this crazy world. But you actually contracted COVID about a month or so ago when we were recording this, when we were recording this. What was that experience like for you? You got symptoms, right? It wasn't the asymptomatic type situation.
No, it's weird how that happened. So this is in April. This happened in April. So, I ended up contracting it. My wife had it, went on a business trip, had it, and came back from that business trip. And if you know my wife, she's a hypochondriac. She doesn't get out. We boarded ourselves. Basically, we isolated ourselves in this house when COVID hit because we have a 4-year-old, didn't know what his reaction was going to be, had a 19-year-old. So we just try to limit access inward and out and going out as well. But she came back from a business trip that she had to go on, came back and her partner ended up testing positive over a weekend and called her on a Monday morning. She had 0 symptoms, not one issue, not a cough, breathing, nothing. Went and got tested and she ended up being positive. Came home. I ended up taking my kids to go get tested. And then we were all negative. My wife was positive. The rest of us, my son, my 19-year-old, my 4-year-old were negative.
Yeah.
And 5 hours later, I get sick. 5 hours later, Jason, after getting tested, which I was negative, I get sick. And it's the old, the chills, 102-degree temperature. Felt like I was, that night I go to sleep. It felt like I was playing in a football game at 50 years old.
Yeah.
And, it felt like I got hit by a truck, by a big fullback.
Right.
But went through it for about a day and a half. and got through it. Took me about 3 or 4 days to finally push it out. And of course, my 19-year-old, who's my trash talker, didn't even feel it. He was asymptomatic as well. And he called me all kind of names, as you can imagine.
I can imagine. I can imagine. And they're not pleasant names, and we'll try not to repeat those on the show, I'm imagining. But interestingly enough for you, not only going through that, but you started this podcast too. And that kind of all happened around the same time. The podcast started, I think it was earlier 2020. 2020 has been such a crazy year, but you decided to start a podcast too, the Darren Woodson Show. What's this been like post ESPN venturing into the podcast world? It's a great show, by the way.
It's something I never wanted to get involved in. Honestly, Jason, when I left ESPN, I felt like that was it. Didn't want to get back into the media circus. Didn't want to get on another plane or talk football. I just had enough after playing football since I was 7 years old. Through the process of, I just retired a couple years. I'm 51 right now. I was 49 years old when I left ESPN after 14 years of being there. I just was tired of talking sports.
Yeah. And
I have two businesses here, a real estate firm and a software company that I wanted to get back to and run full time. And I made that decision to leave ESPN. And then, after about a year and a half break, a couple of my partners that are inside my real estate company, we were having conversations all the time about not so much sports, but just about life and the ups and downs. And I am one guy that loves to hear the journey, man. I don't know what it is about hearing people's stories that just intrigue me. And it's not, I'm serious, not football, not baseball, basketball, but just people in general. Yeah, and you're hearing the ups and downs, and everyone has a story where they had to go through something in their life and how they overcame those obstacles. And I got intrigued. My buddies carried me, and they said, "You're going to do this." And I said, "Okay." We've been talking about it for 6 months.
Yeah.
I finally pulled the trigger, man, and I am in love with doing this podcast, the Darren Woodson Show. And just like you, man, I mean, it's just interesting to be on that side of it, asking questions and getting thrilling stories.
How hard was that for you to say goodbye to ESPN? Because we both lived this in the last few years. Was that hard for you, or was that a lot easier for you? Sounded like you were tired and you were ready to step away.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, I was there 14 years, and I'd say it was about year 9, year 8, God said, "There's more." Came to me basically and said, "There's more than just sports in life. And you've been doing this for a long time and you haven't been listening." And I wasn't listening. Yeah. I just kept chugging along, just doing what was natural. And not doing what could be disruptive. And God came in, and I don't know how many times it was on my heart when I got on that plane to go to ESPN to say, "No, this is my last year." And I even told Seth Markman and the guys over there, "Hey, I can't do this anymore." And then here comes another contract. And I'm like, "Okay, I'll do it again." So, and I just got caught up in this vicious cycle, probably for the last 7 years of being at ESPN. And then my last year, my real estate firm had one of my partners named Sharon Morrison asked me about my purpose. And, we have a faith-driven commercial real estate firm here. And she asked me about my purpose because she knew I was just in this place.
Yeah.
And it just brought me to tears, man, to think that I knew I was done. There's no way I could get back on that plane because my purpose was serving the Lord, and I didn't feel like I was serving. I really didn't. I felt like I was just doing something that came natural, that was comfortable, that I had done since I was 7 years old. But once I broke those chains, man, it felt like the weight of the world fell off me. And it just gave me that feeling of, okay, there's a new adventure. He's got my back, and we're going. So that's it. That's how it ended up happening.
I love it. Darren Woodson's our guest here on Sports Spectrum. Let me ask you about that faith. You said, kind of reconnecting with God as you're in your late 40s and having that sort of new purpose discovery. But where does that faith begin? Where does it take shape? Where does it kind of form itself for you?
Well, I grew up in the church, man. I know, like Jason. literally grew up in the church. So church was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, as you can imagine, every day.
Yeah.
So my mother, I grew up in a single parent household. My mother worked 2 jobs and she had 4 kids. And myself being the youngest, 2 older brothers and a sister. And the way she kept us off the streets was you go to school, you get off the school bus, you go into the church. Church was right 2 doors down from a YMCA. However you want to do it, but you're going to go to the Y, you're going to go to the church. And that's as far as it goes. And this is like, I could throw the rock from the church, I could throw the rock and hit the YMCA on the side of the wall. So it's all far away. But that's how she kept us off the streets. So I always had an understanding of on the faith side. And my mother, again, was a strong woman, faithful woman, was a praying mom. I mean, prayed for everything. Even today, I sit down and every time I eat, doesn't matter where I am, I'm saying that prayer.
Yeah.
It's just it's been instilled in me for so long. So my mother, we went through that, and then listen. There were times in my life, and there has been, especially specifically when I got into high school, like my sophomore year, where I started to stray, and I was more reflective on what was going on worldly. What's the cars. I grew up in the inner city, but I wanted things. I had desires, and that led me somewhat away. I still went to church, but I wasn't fully wrapped up in my faith and my journey. And it took, and I can tell you how it happened to me. I didn't have anything that was drastic in my life that ended up occurring to me.
Yeah.
But it was my junior year in college. And this is at the height of my time at Arizona State University. Had made all these all-American lists and things were really good. And I was just being a regular student and student athlete and enjoying my life, winning and prosperity and all these worldly things were around me. I just had so many good things going on that it was at 2:30, it was actually 2:34 a.m. I was in bed and I got up and I just started crying, man. And I don't know why. I'm not a crier at all. Yeah. And I could, uncontrollable, and I didn't know what it was, but there was a presence in my room that day that I knew was none else than our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. There was something in that room that made me stand up and hands up, on my knees, just started praying. And I just found myself in that position all over again. And it was maybe 20 minutes of feeling this feeling. And there was nothing that was holding me there that was making me, there was nothing in my life. Everything was good in my life. I think he just had to show himself back to me to say, hey, that's just of the world. Come back, get back centered.
That's good.
And I got back centered. And I tell you what, I went back to the campus that next morning, and Lovie Smith, who's the head coach at University of Illinois, formerly of the head coach of Chicago Bears, was my position coach. And Coach Smith, I won't call him Lovie, Coach Smith always had us, everyone that came through that facility at Arizona State, all his linebackers and safeties, we all went to church together. We did Bible study. He just held us tight. And I told him, I came back, and he was a man that he was probably my first father figure in my life.
Yeah. And
I told him, I got back, it's almost like I could not wait to get to campus that day to tell him what had occurred. And when I met with him, he just looked at me and said, that's not unusual. So he's just calling you back. He's just reminding you. And we had this strong conversation as men could only have together. And I just told him, man, I need to get back on track. And he says, well, hey, start your own Bible study. And there we went. We started doing, Bible study. I started doing my own. My junior year in college, which again was all the way far left from where I was. And, things just started to fall back in line, man. I just had this peace.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I was changing. I wasn't just changing self. I wasn't just working on myself. I was ridding myself of the desires.
Let me ask you about seeing God as father. This was a struggle for me because I didn't have a father around much either. Mine was around but not present. Yours, it sounds like you didn't even know your dad, or at least he wasn't around in your life.
No,
but,
similar. I knew him, but he wasn't as present as, good relationship with him now, but we just, at the time as a child, when you really need that father figure, he was not around.
So was that hard to see God as father when you didn't have a father figure to kind of show you who what a father should be like? Was that hard for you? Because it was hard for me.
Yeah, you know what? It wasn't, because as a child, I felt like, when I would pray to, my mother always used to say, look, when you pray, you are in the womb of God. You're having this conversation. And I would watch, now again, I had a praying mom, and so that's all I saw my entire life. And I would just, through visually watching her pray, and my mom's going to pray and the tears are going to come down. Her relationship, I would just watch and say, okay, I get it. Like, it was deeper. I can't tell you. It wasn't like, she was praying to something that was, not there in the room. She's praying. He's right there. He's holding her hand. He's holding her chin up. So that's how my prayers were. So I always felt like he was Father God. I've always in my heart have said, I don't think I've ever had that situation where I was like, well, he's, bringing him into that mold. No, he's always been, the Father, the art in heaven, but he's right here personally. And it's like this coffee cup, man. We're sitting here having conversations. And I can't tell you this. I can tell you this, Jason. Played 13 years in the league, right? And I'm not to get off subject. But in my worst, darkest times in life, he was there. In times where I was on the football field and I had zero gas left, he's there. And I'm having these conversations, and people used to always say, who are you talking to? You are crazy. Yeah, I'm a little crazy, but I just know when I need to lean on something, and he was always there. God is always there to lean on.
And we'll get back to our conversation with Darren Woodson, the three-time Super Bowl champ, in just a second. But want to tell you some more about our friends at IJM, today's sponsors and great partners to work with. The work that they do is so important. We care about what they care about, and that is that every person deserves to be safe and free from violence. What they do is they work with local authorities to rescue victims of violence, bringing criminals to justice, restoring survivors, and then strengthening justice systems. IJM is helping to protect more than 150 million people around the world from violence and oppression. But they cannot do this work alone. They need your help. They need our help. And that's why I'm reaching out to you to consider joining them and becoming a Freedom Partner. Freedom Partners are some of IJM's most loyal partners in the work of justice, and their support of $24 or more each month, tax deductible, helps survivors of slavery and violence from the moment they're rescued until they are fully restored. It may not seem like a lot to give, but it's life-changing. So I'm encouraging you, if you have some extra cash lying around, join us in being a Freedom Partner. Join IJM in being a Freedom Partner. It really does make a huge difference in the world. Check out ijm.org/TF to become a Freedom Partner. ijm.org/TF. Now back to our conversation with Darren Woodson. He joins us here today on Sports Spectrum. So I want to pivot to the football side of things because you talked about that moment, that powerful moment at Arizona State, but then you come to the NFL and success just throws itself on you right away. 3 Super Bowls in 4 seasons, 4 straight NFC Championship games. How did you handle that success so quickly for you? When you come into the league and you said you had all these accolades when you were in college. Well, that didn't change when you got to the NFL because suddenly you're a Super Bowl champion, you're a Pro Bowler, and all this success hits you.
Yeah, having a strong foundation. But listen, I was not immune to the ups and downs. And you said it right. When I came into an organization, which was a flamboyant organization with Michael Irvin and Charles Haley and Emmitt Smith, we had so many personalities within this organization that were alpha dog mentality, had that alpha dog. And, I can tell you this, one lesson I learned when I was in college, and remind me to go back to this, but the lesson I learned when I was in college, it's okay to be a dog and be a Christian, especially on the football field. I'm not saying off the field. You take off the dog when you walk off and cross that line, but when you're on the football field, it's okay to be that warrior. And Lovie Smith would tell me, hey man, this is what God made you to be. He had tons of warriors, and it's like, be that warrior. Don't back down. Watch your mouth, but you represent your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to the fullest. And so it wasn't like I was going to be subtle and not be violent on the football field. I wanted to be a violent Christian on the football field. That's just what I was. I wanted to be that. So when I came over to the Cowboys and got drafted, they were always, guys are always like, how do you play this game as violent as you do and then walk off the field and you're going to go to Bible study and hang out with John Weber, who's the pastor, and do these things and just smile and have a good time? And I said, football is just, it's a game that we play, but my life, my real meaning is, this is who I am. I take off these pads, even with the pads on, I'm still the same guy. But coming in here and making this transition was, this was a very flamboyant organization, just by our owner, Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys. You knew what you're getting into. But it was just, for me, it wasn't that hard because my foundation was so set and so strong. And my family, which is, look, I couldn't do this by myself. Jason, not one thing in my life I've done by myself. Right. Not one. I haven't accomplished anything by myself. So I've surrounded myself with people that hold me accountable. If I have a bad game, my brothers were, hey, you were terrible today. You sucked.
They keep you accountable.
They held me accountable. If I was, if my walk wasn't right, you better believe my sister and my mom or someone was going to come. My best friends were going to tell me, hey man, let's get back on point. But that's what I needed. I needed someone in a group of people that was my circle to always hold me on point. And I'm just the same. I'm going to hold my buddies and these guys that you talked to. That we did an interview with you. Yeah. That's coming up on our podcast with my two co-hosts are faithful men. And it's a joy to be around those guys every day because, again, they're going to hold me accountable for my actions.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you got to Dallas and Jimmy Johnson's there, and they had already established themselves as a good team, but they hadn't won a Super Bowl yet. They were, I think, 11-5 in 91, and then you come in with this really awesome class in the 92 team, and you're kind of figuring out your way and finding your way that first season, although you still won a Super Bowl. But it wasn't until 93, I believe, when you became a starter, and suddenly you're establishing yourself. So what was that like? Maybe there's a moment when you realize, I'm not the guy trying to fit in anymore. I'm the guy that's a mainstay starter that's really making a difference here. Do you remember that moment?
No, in my mind, my football ego was way outside of itself because my rookie year, I was 21, 22 years old. Yeah. And I felt like I was the best player on that defense.
Really?
Honestly, man. I mean, it's just a mentality that I've always had to be like, when I walk on the field, I'm the dude. I mean, that's how I've always felt.
That was the number one defense in the NFL, if I remember, in 92, right? Yeah. I'm just saying.
So I get an understanding how people like Deion Sanders, people always say, well, Deion and Michael Irvin, they're this way and this. No, it's just an unbelievable feeling to when you believe in self. Like you can truly believe in who you are and your work ethic and what you put into this and your skill set. So when I came in my rookie year, I looked around and I thought, well, I should be starting. And I had a number of conversations with Dave Campbell, the position coach, to Jimmy Johnson, the head coach, about why aren't I playing more? Why don't you give me an opportunity? So my first year, although I was a team guy, I wanted to win games. I wanted to be a starter. And I went through a year. My first year trust me, I loved it. We won a Super Bowl. I had a great time. And, again, you win a Super Bowl, it's like a fraternity.
Right.
You guys are going to be friends forever. But there was that burning instance that was inside of me, man, that just said, I'm not going to be satisfied until they call my name as the starter. So the first season ended. We ended up beating the Buffalo Bills 52-17 in the Super Bowl. And the day later, my brother, that night after the win, my brother Randy walked up to me and he said, "You satisfied?" And I was like, "Nope." I'm not satisfied. I won't be satisfied. And he was like, "Good, go get it." So that off season, I worked. Basically, that off season started for me like 3 or 4 days later. Man, I was already getting focused. Jimmy Johnson came did a press conference a week after the Super Bowl and said, "Okay, Darren Woodson is going to be my starter next year."
Mm.
And it wasn't a relief. It was like, okay, I get it. He knew that, he knew then that I should have been starting. And, for me, it was just a satisfaction of hearing it from his mouth. But then the work really started to really gain, because I wanted to prove him right and everybody else right at the same time. But it was a trying year of holding the ego back that entire year, because there's so many times I wanted to be disruptive and say something, but I always had to bite my tongue, especially in team events, because I just wanted so much to be the starter.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I remember asking Michael Irvin when he was at ESPN this question. I said, "How much do you think about the 94 NFC Championship game?" Which Troy, I think, has said this, that it's the most proud he's ever been of his team, because they battled. You guys had injuries. That 94 year was a tough year. San Francisco ended up beating you guys and winning the Super Bowl. But I told Michael, I said, "I think if you guys win that game, that's a 4 in a row, maybe 5 in a row type of run." And obviously it's hard to predict what's going to happen here and there. But do you think about losses like that more than you think about the 3 Super Bowl wins?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jason, I can't remember the big plays that I made.
Yeah.
I really can't. I mean, Trey Wingo, who was on the set with me at ESPN, used to remind me, who was a Cowboy fan, used to remind me of all the big plays. The intercept. Oh, remember this play you made an interception? You caused this fumble? And I was like, no.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all the bad plays, they're right here.
Yeah.
They're right in front of my face, all the time. And, losing that game in 94, after the game, someone said, "What are the lessons you learned after this season?" And none.
You lost. Yeah, that's it.
We lost. And leading up to that point, we had dominated that series. And that was I didn't take away from it what Troy took away from it. I think what I did take away from that, losing that game, was humility.
Yeah. Because
coming from that point, there wasn't a whole lot of humility in that locker room. I mean, matter of fact, going into that game, I was thinking in my mind, there's no way we're losing this game.
Right. Even with the injuries or all that, didn't even.
No, because we just had their number. We always felt like didn't matter what happened in the regular season, didn't matter. Once we got into the tournament, the playoffs, that's when the dogs were going to step up, and they slapped us in the mouth. Hey, these guys are working just as hard as us. They're trying to they're hungry just like us. And so the humility really came into that off season for me. And that's just life, man. In life, it's the same thing. You're going to have some good days and you're going to have some bad days. I used to have a coach named Joe Avazano who used to always say, God bless him. God rest his soul.
Yeah.
But Joe Avazano used to say, sometimes you're going to eat the bear and sometimes the bear is going to eat you. You just make sure you have the fork. You have the fork more often than he does.
That is awesome. I love that. Darren Woodson's joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Woody, I got to ask you about you said flamboyancy when you walk into that team with alpha dogs and guys like Michael and Emmett and Dion. Give me a story, your favorite story. Maybe it's just a Michael Irvin story or just an Emmitt Smith story or just a Deion Sanders story. I'd love to just ask you all day long about stories from each of these guys, but we only have so much time on a podcast. So give me your favorite story from any of those guys. Maybe it's a Charles Haley story, but something that you're just like, this is what describes what these guys were like and what it was like.
So, look, we're G on this show.
Yeah.
So I'll give you, it's going to be edgy here, but I'll just give you a story of who this organization was and what my teammates were like. So my first year, I get drafted, and on that draft day, before the draft, they were talking about the Cowboys needing to upgrade their secondary.
Right.
They needed more corners, they needed more safeties, they needed more speed in the back end of their secondary. So on draft day, I had no idea I was going to the Cowboys, but ended up being drafted by the Cowboys. And so the first day we get drafted, and then back then we used to have these mini camps for rookies. So if the draft was on April 25th, on May 1st or 2nd, the rookies would come in. Veterans could not be around. It was just the rookies.
Yeah.
And the rookies would come in during mini camp and start to understand the system. It's a 3-day camp. And then you go back home or go back to school, whatever you're going to do until the end of June or mid-June or whatnot. So we're in a room, and it's 7 rookies that had gotten drafted. Some guys had gotten drafted, some guys were free agents.
Right.
But we're all in this room, and we were the prize of the draft. Kevin Smith, myself, Clayton Holmes, it was a number of guys, Greg Briggs, a number of guys that they drafted that day, that during that time. And Dave Campbell has the clicker, and he's going over tape of the defenses that the Cowboys secondary runs. So we're going through through the tape, and we're all watching film, and it's a dark room. And all of a sudden you hear this noise, just boom. And the door gets kicked in. He just opens the door. And I'm sitting near the front of the room to the right, and this guy walks in, and he turns on the lights and starts to walk up front, and he has no clothes on. None. Not a pair of socks.
So I have 3 names in my head of who this might be, but keep going.
He just walks in. He struts up to the front, and I'm seeing this guy, and I'm trying to make eye contact. I'm seeing him, but I'm like, it's straight eye contact, brother. And he turns around, and it's the first time I've ever met Michael Irvin, who I'm sure you guessed that's who it was.
It was either going to be Irvin or it was going to be Charles Haley. So
yes, one of the two. So Irvin walks in. He says, "Yeah, you guys are the prize of the draft, and we needed to get better in the secondary." And he's just, going in and challenging everybody, in that moment. And I'm telling you, he's talking, and I'm like, what is this dude doing? Like, he has no clothes on. And, he challenges everybody. And first of all, he's not supposed to be there on site. So that's an NFL rule that he breaks by being there. And then secondly, he's talking to us with no clothes on. That's the second rule that he breaks. But he comes in, man, and he's just Mike. He's just the loud, booming voice that you hear on Sunday NFL Network. He's the same guy, the same loud voice. And he says, "Hey, when we get out on the field, I'm going to kill you. And then he walks back out the door, slams the door, and takes off. And then the crazy thing is Dave Campbell stands up, turns off the lights, doesn't miss a beat. Here's cover 3.
He just keeps going.
Just keeps going. And I was like, welcome to the Cowboys, brother.
Oh, my gosh. That's an amazing, amazing story. It's funny, too, because I think by that time, Mike only had that really one good season in 91. So he wasn't on the, 5, 6, 7 seasons in a row of being in the Pro Bowl or whatever. But yet that was just who he was.
That's who he was, man. And you let him tell you. And, I talk about that mentality, that dog mentality. That was – and it wasn't just Mike. It was – Emmitt maybe wasn't as flamboyant, but his confidence level was extremely high. Troy, extremely high. Jay Novacek, there were so many guys on our offensive line, by far best offensive line in football, probably in history of football.
Maybe ever. Yeah.
Yeah. So, there was this certain mentality of walking into that locker room that it was our time.
Mm.
It was definitely our time.
So you win the 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. Then reality starts hitting in. You realize I can't do that. We can't do this every year. And you have some good years, but certainly not any of the years like you did from, say, 92 to 95, I guess, maybe 96 a little bit. And then it starts, getting difficult. You were there during some really tough times too.
Man.
Some 5-11 seasons that Cowboy fans just thought this could never happen. But then in 03 and 04, you're done. And you have the injury and you say goodbye. I really want to kind of fast forward a little bit for time purposes and just talk about transitioning away from football. How difficult was that for you?
It was different. It was difficult in the sense that, even when you're hurt in football, if you're hurt and you miss a game or you're not in the meetings, you don't feel like you're part of the team.
Yeah.
And it's the weirdest feeling. Even, I'm just saying, just if you had a high ankle sprain and I wasn't in the game plan, it's like your brothers are out there battling and you're on the sideline. You're not in the meeting. You don't feel a part of it. You only feel a part of it when you're out there and you're dressed out and you're working together. You're going to meetings together, and that's when you feel a part of it. And I went through a situation where I hurt my back and basically missed most of the season, all of the season in my last year, and it was the worst experience that I could possibly have because I'd never missed, more than 1, 2. I think I missed like 3 games in my entire career.
Yeah.
And, for me to not be a part of it was really hard to deal with. I mean, extremely hard to deal with. And it took a lot of me leaning on my faith, talking to some people that within the organization that were strong Christians that, allowed me to go through that process. But when I ended up retiring, Jason, there was a sense, even through that process, there was a sense of depression because part of my identity was wrapped up into who I was as a football player. I think a lot of who I was wrapped up into I was a strong Christian, but I always identified with being Darren Woodson, football player, Dallas Cowboy, Arizona State, and whatnot. And my entire life has been that way. And to not have that, to have it be gone and just stripped away was hard because I didn't know what to do the next day. I really didn't. Once I retired, I didn't, it's almost like you're lost. Like, which way is the wind blowing? Because, I'm 36 years old. And now what's next? What do I do? One thing that was really like a saving grace for me was that ESPN had called when I was, months before, and it allowed me to transition into being, still talking football, but it never felt the same. I never really, and that was one of the hardest transitions I had to go through because, again, the identity had been shaken up, and that's when your faith really comes in. I got so many burdens. I'm too weak to carry these burdens. So I asked, the Father to carry these burdens. And I don't know how many times that I said that after I retired because I was emotional about it. I wasn't a part of the organization. I wasn't, I was missing that locker room feel. There were so many things that I was missing that it affected me in so many other ways. So I was always asking to carry those burdens for me. He carried them, man. He carried them. It was the roughest time. But I've seen so many guys struggle to this day. I think that's the number one struggle. And more specific to, we always see the lifespan of an NFL player is 3 years, 2.8 or 3 years, something like that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So most of the time you see players, they'll come and go. The guys that are in the locker room see that. But what the fan normally sees are the Tom Brady's and the 12, 14-year, 18-year, careers. They see their favorite stars for the long run. But when their favorite stars stop playing, you think about this. If you get cut when you're in your 3rd year, you're probably about 25 years old. You've had that time to, you had to go through it. Identity took a shot, but now you're 25 years old and you have a long time to get, acclimated, get into corporate America, get going at 25. Well, I was 36.
Yeah.
So that was hard, man. That was a really hard transition. And I'd seen so many of my good friends, the Brian Dawkinsons of the world, and the guys that I played against and with, and I'm watching them on Sunday. That was hard to get through.
Let me ask you one story that you could share, your favorite story maybe from working at ESPN. And I know you said the first 8 years you were there, but then the last 6 or 7 or whatever it was, you were kind of in and out in terms of the enjoyment process, although the people were great. I mean, it allowed you and me to meet and work together. And I'm always saying I don't miss the work necessarily, but I miss the people. I miss being around the camaraderie and the producers and those meetings and just having fun with guys. But do you have a story that you can share? Just a funny ESPN story? Because there's a lot of them, I'm sure.
Yeah, so many. Like I can remember the story of Herm Edwards and I, who were best of friends, getting into an argument on the set. I mean, a real argument on the set.
Yeah. On air or
on air?
Off air? On air.
It was on air, and then we had to run into a commercial break, but we argued the whole time off air, and then Trey Wingo had to tell us to shut up.
Yeah.
So that's one. But I would say my first year making that transition was one that you talk about humility. It was so embarrassing, but we used to call them. We used to have to do these things called AIs. Actually, it was IAs, or instant analysis.
Yeah.
It's just you and the camera, and they tell you got 30 seconds to talk about, I don't know, Jerry Rice. Give me 30 seconds to talk about Jerry Rice, and you have to, bam, just go. Yep. And you have to have this clock while you're talking about Jerry Rice and his greatness and what he does and strengths and weaknesses and blah blah. But you have to be counting in your head as well at the same time, and it's like 30 seconds. I've watched Mark Schlereth, who's phenomenal. Awesome. Say do an IA. An instant analysis, and Mark Schlereth, bam, he's doing it, right? So my very first week, I'm at ESPN. They asked me to do an instant analysis, and I'm sitting on the set with Mark Schlereth and Trey Wingo, and I had seen Mark do them a number of times, but I was like, man, that's got to be rough. But then they asked me to do it, and I was like, oh my God. So
it wasn't like when you were a rookie in the NFL and you just walked in and said, I should be a starter. No, it was different.
Oh no. I knew my place when I got there. I was terrible. Right. So I'm doing this. I start the instant analysis, and I'm like, all right, 3, trying to get my confidence up, swaggering up. All right, 3, 2, 1. And I go 46 takes later.
46. Oh my gosh.
Trey Wingo is sitting sideways on the chair. Mark Schlereth had left. They were like, that was, to me, that was one of the most humiliating times. I mean, you figure out who you are, man. I'm serious. There's times in situations you figure out who you are. And I knew exactly who I was at that moment. And Trey Wingo is he's my dude, man.
I love Trey.
Trey Wingo wrapped his arm around me and said, we need to get to work, don't we? And I was like, sure do.
I love Trey is so good at that too, in just helping others. I had a story that I wrote in my new book about Trey and how he just showed me it was a day he introduced me to Emmett when Emmett came to ESPN. And Emmett was one of my guys, and he knew that I was a big Cowboys fan. He just took this extra, 5 minutes out of his day and said, Jason, you and Emmett need to talk, and just gave me 5 minutes with Emmett. And I know that's not a big deal for a lot of people.
No, it is a big deal.
I was so scared and nervous just meeting one of my heroes. You still work at ESPN, but so that just shows you who Trey is. So I could just picture him putting his arm around you and saying, we'll get through this, but you got a lot of work to do.
I tell you what, Jason, it never stopped. Every day for 14 years, Trey Wingo would remind me, put me in uncomfortable situations. It never, ever stopped. The teaching, I used to call him sensei, because I knew if something was coming. Reading a prompter showed me how to read a prompter. It just showed me so much about just, that side of the business.
Yeah, that is Trey Wingo. He was great. Last question. Thank you so much for your time. You've been generous. I want to ask this. We asked this to all of our guests. So 2020 has been a crazy year. We talked about some of the things that you went through early on. What's the Lord showing you right now? What's he teaching you? What's the great lesson that God has kind of impressed upon your heart over these last, days, months, even, the year?
Grace. His grace. His grace and how to pass on that. how to push through. Look, I think one of the biggest issues that I've always tried. I'm on 3 or 4 boards here in Dallas: Make-A-Wish Foundation, United Way, C5 Texas. I've been on a lot of boards.
Yeah.
And one of the things that God has always put on my heart is I have to serve and go back. I'm not talking about just going back to my own hometown or whatnot, but go back into the inner city and give that word of faith, strength, education. I mean, he's using me right now, Jason, and has been. I'll get teary-eyed on this, man, but and has been for the last couple of years. And I know with the social issues that really are in our face right now, he's even fueled that fire even more. Not as far as the divisiveness, but as far as showing me the way, or showing me who that community is, and these are the things that I can do myself. I can't do everything, but if I stay hyper-focused on giving the word and talking about education, I can force change. And that's what I've done. 2 things: Word of God, education. That's where that's where I'm hyper-focused right now. And I just think that's just through his grace. I mean, there's just been so much going on in this world, man, but I'm staying the course, man. I'm not being divisive.
No, that's good.
Staying the course, because the only way we change is through him. There's no other way we're going to change where we are, who we are as a country. Got to go through God.
He is Darren Woodson, a 3-time Super Bowl champion, and I'm just glad to know you, brother. Thanks for all your encouragement over the years, and thanks for being a great friend. So glad you got to do this with me, and thanks for sharing us today on the show.
Hey, man, I appreciate you and the platform, brother. Really do, man. You keep serving, man.
And many thanks to Darren Woodson for joining us here today on the show. He's awesome. I mean, I could have gone another hour or 2 with that guy just talking about the Cowboys and those 1990 Dynasty Cowboy teams that he was on 3 Super Bowl championship squads. I mean, he was just really good as a football player, but even better, he's a great guy. Got to spend a lot of time around him during my time at ESPN and got to know him pretty well. But honestly, we didn't talk a ton about faith, and so it was really fun to hear him share his story today of sports and faith. And I'll tell you a quick story about Darren. Back in 2016, I just started getting the opportunity to preach and share and speak at my church here at Hillside in Bristol, Connecticut. And so I'm up there one day on a Sunday morning, and I'm sharing a message, and about 5 minutes into the sermon, Darren Woodson walks through the door. He was obviously in town working at ESPN, and somebody invited him to come to church that morning, and he came to our church, and there's Darren Woodson walking through the doors as I'm up at the pulpit speaking and sharing. I don't even remember what I was talking about. All I could think about was, oh my gosh, 3-time Super Bowl champion Darren Woodson walked through those doors, and he's listening to me share the gospel right now on a Sunday morning. And I have no idea if I even coherently expressed what the gospel was or spoke clearly or whatever, but I will say he came up to me after and said thanks for a good word. So hopefully what I said made sense. But all I could think about was Darren Woodson is sitting there watching me speak and share, and I'm a Cowboys fan who grew up watching this guy and rooting for him. So it was a pretty cool moment, and Darren has always been a great encouragement to me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's conversation with Darren Woodson. Again, thanks to Darren. We also thank our sponsors and partners, IJM. Check them out at ijm.org/TF, and you can become a freedom partner and help end slavery and violence today. ijm.org/TF. You can also go to our website, sportspectrum.com. That's the home base for all of our content here at the Ministry of Sports Spectrum. We have daily devotionals in the morning, every single day, Monday through Friday. We also have our podcast. Every single podcast is there on the website. And then we have articles all day long, stories on athletes and other people in the world of sports intersecting with the world of faith right there at sportspectrum.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Love you guys. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.